even though we initially thought of some of our rural communities, we think this could be a useful tool for any community, whether urban or rural, because it's really about kind of gathering people together, getting some synergy, and just tackling whatever community projects you might have at hand.
So with that, Kevin, I'm gonna pass the ball over to you.
All right, thank you. Well, appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. I'm going to start out by just giving you a little bit of background on Keep Iowa Beautiful, and then we'll get into the specifics of Hometown Pride program. So this is our brochure that we often share with communities and community leaders that are interested. Keep Iowa Beautiful, this is our mission, really promoting the vitality of communities through improvement and enhancement programs is where we started almost 20 years ago. We're founded by then Governor Ray and Don Lamberti, the founder of Casey's. The early focus was a lot on ending litter and beautifying communities. So we still have programs, but we've kind of taken that knowledge and expertise and expanded it into the program of Hometown Pride. So we're affiliated with Keep America Beautiful, which has affiliates all over the United States. These are our core areas. So at the top of it is inspiring hometown pride, preventing littering, beautifying communities, and we really emphasize partnerships. We really believe that we work best when we work together. A couple of the programs that you may be familiar with that we've administered. It's almost a 20-year partnership with Diamond Vogel, where we've awarded Paint Our Beautiful grants. It's touched almost 1,000 projects throughout all 99 counties, and some 12,000 gallons of paint have been distributed. So this is the map that shows where those projects have landed over the years. Hometown Pride started about 8 years ago, and we've had great success where it's operated. So the counties in pink are where we're currently in operation. As Adam mentioned, I got some strong partnerships in eastern Iowa, but also been down in southwest Iowa and up in northwest Iowa as well. So what is Hometown Pride? The center of it is designed to really activate a community, and we believe that a catalyst can be a coach. The coach doesn't do the work, but does bring in together a committee that's representative of that community. And often we see that there's been some plans. A lot of it goes through a city clerk that's way overworked, and there's just a little bit of inertia of jumpstarting some projects. So the coach is aimed at helping local residents, but also extends through city council, city clerks, managers, that brings in the skills and tools that can help those projects get activated. And it's really focused on skills that enhance and support the plans and visions for the future of the community, so that there's enhancement both culturally and economically, so that we makes that community even more desirable to work, live, and raise a family. So we have a toolkit. We've had a real success with these hometown pride coaches, and so I have a lot of good lessons learned. So these are the specific services that are typically provided in this program. So the coach helps the community identify and develop programs that provide guidance and the oversight of the activities. It reviews the community, county, and regional plans to see where there might be intersection and some action that way, or help a community plan in developing a short-term plan with those goals and priorities. So the emphasis is really on local control, trying to activate the interest in programs, and we'll talk about some examples of those. So additionally, some services, as a conduit to relationships with local, state, and regional economic development, and then those technical supports. So often that's been through grants, leveraging local resources for grants, establishing training, education sessions for leaders that can activate activity. And then the coach helps oversee the coordination with the economic development groups, government agencies, and others that community wants to focus in on. And overall, the funding source is obviously the key. And so coaches are good at unlocking that and trying to help achieve goals and priorities through that mechanism, but also giving some research to identify grants that match up well with the desires of that community, and maybe some fundraising to help implement those goals. So here's some projects that were done by Warren County, just south of Polk County and Des Moines area. Everything from an art trail to murals to downtown improvements, recreational parks, cleanup parks. Those all helped improve the public amenities, but also it's important in that sense of community. So there's a number of visioning and projects that just make the community more livable in the sense of we belong here. We've got people that we like living with. And so the Front Porch project in Norwalk was a series of events. Indianola did a great visioning plan that helped them identify everything from graduation to holiday lanes. But also then, at the citizen level too, some helping community meals, garage sales. There's just any number of ways that these groups can get activated, and through the Hometown Pride Committee. So here's some examples in Indianola. I mentioned some the murals that they did on the side of a building, in water tower, the artwork on a basketball court, planters, or just a little bit of a taste, but then also leveraging for grants. So this year they leveraged $120,000 of grants that were used for various projects. Here's some in Pocahontas County. They've put a lot of emphasis on gardens and parks. Down in Fremont County, a lot of emphasis on community in Fremont, and I'm going to give you some sort of a report after their 5 years, but they really felt like communities in their county, as population went down, weren't necessarily working together. And so they wanted to bring that synergy together, not only in the community, but across the county. And it's had great results. In Pocahontas, they put a lot of emphasis, like I mentioned, in parks. So here's an example where they put a new trail in their park. So Fremont County. So here's an example of Doug Friedley was the coach. And at the 5-year point, these are all the communities, and also included rural Fremont County residents. There's Doug in a meeting with his committee. So they set out their goals, and at the top of the list was help reverse population base. And Fremont County is on the Missouri River, and they really got hit hard with flood. So they didn't quite reverse the trend, but they sure made a number of improvements on these: improve first impressions, enhance the quality of life, eliminate nuisance and derelict properties, engage youth, develop leadership capacity, and capture some of the transfer of wealth by building their community foundations. And so they had cleanup events, whether they made new welcome signs, which here's an example of Farragut, recreational trails. A lot of emphasis is on that, helping raise funds and execute the demolition of old buildings that are falling down. And then leadership is also, so they actually did a leadership committee or academy for their local youth. So over that 5-year period, Fremont County had over 500 community monthly meetings of these committees, 163 support organizations. So they worked with Trees Forever, Iowa Architects. They tapped into these community foundation, Iowa Economic Development, and others. So they had over almost 300 citizens that were involved, some 13,000 volunteer hours. So they calculated at just $20 an hour, almost $300,000 of benefit. They made 143 grant applications, 116 were granted, so 60,000. And importantly, they really worked on their community endowments. So they had over 108,000 that went into their endowments just in that short period. That's going to be a real building block for future projects. So some of the outcomes in those cities, Bartlett, Farragut, and Hamburg are just 3 that I picked out on this side. Again, did these kind of community events. Some of it's kind of low-hanging fruit, but I'll tell you what was interesting to me as you look back on it. Some of these smaller projects, whether it's a cleanup project or even a welcome sign, they build some momentum, and so then people get used to working together again, tapping into resources. And then later on, at the end of their 5-year, they were actually working on housing plans that was a priority for their Hometown Pride Committee, and also working on Wi-Fi for rural corners of their county. So sometimes it's the simple step of doing these basic projects that lead to more complicated, but there's really a good track record for that, making that happen. So I'm going to run through some of the projects that were done over in Dubuque County through their Hometown Pride. Again, the emphasis, so they work through Dubuque, Jones, and Jackson County through 2 different coaches. These are projects that were highlighted in those communities, tourism brochures, help facilitate DOT, DNR, and EDA workshops, banners honoring veterans and first responders, a real successful buy local, shop local campaign, tapped into the University of Iowa for some mural expertise that they were able, an example picture here, did various walks of fame for local high school. They did some fundraising for a splash pad, and then the bike share program were just some of the programs that they did. A lot of emphasis in Dubuque on trails and planning, which takes coordination throughout a county. So the coach had a lot of expertise and helped them get the grants and expertise to expand their trail program. Ashbury put a lot of emphasis on parks and examples in these photos. Cascade really wanted a splash pad, so the Hometown Pride Committee really emphasized that. The city of Dubuque, which is one of the larger cities that participated, their Hometown Pride program really rallied around a miracle field for kids with disabilities so they could play various sports. Farley did a whole series of grants that allowed them to tackle some projects that have been sort of sitting on the shelf, gathering dust. An interesting one was Piasta. Someone donated land on the edge of town that was just sitting there, and they decided they'd like to make that into a park. And they decided one use for the park would be a Frisbee golf course. And then they tapped into a company that sells those products and had a tournament. And so it's really a raise to the amenities, but in a low-key way, not that expensive a way, really activated a real recreational opportunity for the community. So those are some of the basics. And I know there was a question that Adam fielded. I know you've heard a lot about the Main Street program, and how does Hometown Pride compare to Main Street? Well, Main Street is a little more focused on the downtown region and trying to tap into historical commercial district, where Hometown Pride is really aimed at touching all 4 corners of a community and really working with all parts of the community through a committee to come up with projects that are going to enhance the vitality and livability of the city. So some of our Hometown Pride communities have actually used Hometown Pride to build the case to tap into some of the funding for hometown for the mainstream program. So they kind of work hand to glove, but they are distinction. Hometown Pride's a little broader. So that's my information. I know Adam's going to follow up my email and my phone number, which I'm sure we could provide after this presentation too. But that's a high-level view, and I know we can drill down and talk more specifically how that's executed, and the reach of a coach and how this program works. So, Adam, hope that's helpful, and be glad to expand on those. I know you have some other comments.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to grab the screen here again. There we go. Let me share my screen. Can we all see this?
Yes.
Okay, so Kevin kind of went over the program a little bit in terms of some of the projects. So really what this is, I guess kind of summarizing this is Karen and I, having worked for local government and being in local government, we understand how busy a lot of you are, which is trying to keep your stuff together. And so one of the things that I kind of really like about this project and this initiative is it kind of gives you a little bit of a helping hand. And we'll talk about the financing model here in a minute, but it kind of gives you a helping hand for some of the things that maybe, you want to do, but sometimes it's just hard to kind of get around to it. It's hard to get a group together. It's hard to help guide some volunteers to do something. And that's one of the reasons I really like this this program. So you'd work with a professional coach who would likely, come from an ECICOG realm, and they would help with initiating and guiding projects that the community cares about. We've kind of toyed around with the idea of doing a little bit more than that in terms of a value add, like maybe one grant per community per year, because that's obviously, we're very, that's kind of our bread and butter, grant writing. We've also, talked about maybe offering goal setting or meeting facilitation, just as kind of an added bonus if you would be interested in participating in the program. And so one of the other benefits is just, the costs are the financing model, and Kevin, feel free to jump in, but the financing model has typically been a certain percentage, maybe between Keep Iowa Beautiful, they do a significant portion of the funding, but Keep Iowa Beautiful also wants the community to have some skin in the game. And so, we've seen communities who pay, it's usually based on population. We've seen communities pay $200 a year for a community coach. We've seen communities pay $1,000 a year for a community coach, but that's an annual expense that community has. And again, it's all about kind of putting some skin in the game for those communities. But Keep Iowa Beautiful, through their generosity, has been very helpful in supporting this project and program. And Kevin, I don't know how long has the program been around?
The first county was Pocahontas. It was almost 8-9 years ago. So
okay. And to my understanding too, just these coaches will come and work with your community group. So, I'm thinking it could be a Parks and Rec committee if that committee exists, but it could also be a Keep Iowa Beautiful committee or a Keep Shellsburg Beautiful committee. I know Keep Iowa Beautiful wants to be able to adapt and help with where they can help. And so, we see it's a low cost. We see a high benefit for some of our communities. And so we think it's a good value. And again, Kevin went through a number of the projects that a number of the counties and cities have worked on. These are just a few more that I decided to mostly pull through: get golf disc course, dog cleanup stations, fundraising for a splash pad, that sort of thing. So what this really kind of means, if you are interested, is we want to know if you have potentially an interest in learning more, or you have an interest in participating. The contribution amounts per city, vary depending on how many cities and towns are interested in participating. But we would see the community and Keep Iowa Beautiful and ECICOG as the partnership to be able to supply a coach for a 5-year time period to help your communities get some work done and try to do some good things for some of our communities. So that's a little bit of the program in a nutshell. We wanted to open it up for questions. There we go. I'm sorry, this should have been. We wanted to open it up for questions if you had any. And just feel free to.
I have a question. So this looks like it's a 5-year commitment, and the community would get a coach probably through ECICOG. Mm-hmm. And it's an annual fee, but is that one meeting a month? Is that as many meetings that is necessary for whatever projects? How does that cost factor?
What we found is, minimum one meeting a month. And so the committees have taken different forms in different locations. Sometimes the city directly appoints, but as Adam mentioned, sometimes it's an existing committee, but it's project related. So if there are projects that need more meeting, the coach is to facilitate that, through Zoom. Some of that's been a little easier than the boots on the ground type meeting. But the 5-year commitment, is it's renewable 1 year at a time. So, but we found that the 5-year arc, if you will, really helps the community develop these relationships and then are primed to keep going. And so actually a couple of the communities that when the 5 years were over, they decided to continue because they liked the synergy and operation. So does that make sense?
Yes. It's not charged per meeting. It's just
No, it's a
here's
it's
our
a yearly,
relationship.
it's a yearly, yeah. And so, it can take a lot of different directions, but what we found is, I think you said you're a city administrator?
City clerk of Springville.
City clerk, yeah. So we found it, city clerks, especially in a town your size, a lot of things go through your desk, through you. Maybe a plan that was put together for some project that just never got, off the shelf. And so the coach, can tap into that, or maybe there's something that's been discussed. The committee can identify, what the priorities are, whether your community has been like, geez, we wish we had a dog park, or we wish we had a splash pad, just 2 examples. But then if that's the goal, then the coach can help, pull together the resources, whether that's fundraising locally or a grant. So it's, it's customized to what your citizens really believe is important, if they would enhance, their day-to-day living.
Thanks.
I see that sometimes it's a county that has, am I on mute?
Nope, you're good.
Oh, okay, all right. Sometimes it's a county. How does it work if you have, 5 or 6 cities in your county? Does the coach meet with each community, or?
Yeah, there's a coach is going to have more than one community, community. So often the synergy's been around the county, but we've talked with, Adam and Karen about, let's say that there's 10 or 12 communities on this call. Some of your neighbors are just across the border in another county. So it doesn't have to necessarily be the borders of the county, but we find that a coach can handle, several communities to keep the train moving, so to speak.
And is this an application that we're interested we apply, or is it?
Well, this is kind of the application. So, Karen and Adam are, interested, so that, using this model, if we get enough communities based on this, then we'll talk about, what those that have raised their hand, what they think is a fair amount to contribute. And like he mentioned, a lot of that's been population based, so that there's a distribution. In some counties, the county supervisors have chipped in. Sometimes the economic development's chipped in as well. So it's usually been 2/3, 1/3 type of arrangement, so that we contribute 2/3, the local communities can contribute 1/3, but we have flexibility to kind of go up and down to make it work.
And so ECICOG is kind of administering this, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, so I think our initial thought was that ECICOG could actually provide the coach and provide that regional connection between the communities, and we would be a part of helping provide that coach. A lot of the work is, and it's not all planning work. It's a lot of planning for events or things, helping to organize and guide for events, that sort of thing. But I think the idea here would be that ECICOG would be able to be a partner in this and help provide that coach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just second that I guess that's what we're viewing our role is providing the coach. And as in our work, as we work with communities, we are frequently involved in the upfront planning process, whether it's a comprehensive plan or doing council goal setting or capital improvement plans. And so for us, this is actually exciting because, we're there for that energy, and then we never get to actually help the community potentially with the next step, and we know that as we look at our the city's professional staff, that they're stretched really thin. And also we know from our experience that often you can get a group of citizens together and you've got a lot of great energy, but they just need a little bit of guidance or structure to kind of help them move forward effectively. And that facilitation role is really exciting for us.
I have a question. We are just starting our community visioning. In fact, our kickoff meeting is tomorrow. How would that work with that as well? Because I don't want to be spread too thin, but how could the two of these work together?
Well, coaches have come into communities where there's already a visioning plan, or they've helped facilitate one. So it can operate, where you're at and where you want to go.
Okay.
And I think there was a question on the chat about the scale. So the scale has been, let's say that, I don't know, let's just say there's 15 communities in this region, and they aren't all from one county. You want to have some equity in it. So, based on a population scale, that's typically how those have been put together. So larger communities pay just a little more than the smaller communities, but that's been as low as $200-300, and top ones have been 2,000 or so. Usually it's lower than that. So there's no exact formula, but we want to make it work. And so we want to price it in a way that works for the communities, but make sure that there is some commitment, at least, like Adam said, skin in the game. So there is a contribution at the local level too. And that is per year. Yeah. So it's a 1-year program that we think 5 years is the typical the period of support that comes from Keep Iowa Beautiful. So does that make sense?
And as you're thinking about support, there's the financial support, but I think if we were to partner with a community, there's other types of support too. So we would need support in getting the word out and sort of forming the committee, or figuring out if there was an existing committee that would be appropriate for the Hometown Pride program. And there, or other types of support in terms of, working with the committee to get notices out about projects or events. So there could be that type of support in addition.
Yeah, typically the coach helps get the committee going, consulting local government, whether they have a committee, but maybe it's a committee that's kind of worn out, they need some new blood, or maybe it's a brand new committee.
So I'm sorry, we're focusing on money, but okay, so a coach will be provided with a cost annually. And then say we kind of get a project going and we need a grant written, or when do the extra fees come in, or how do we know about the extra fees that?
Well, there's no extra fee.
Okay.
So that the coach, if this comes together, there'd be a coach, and the commitment would be that we would support it. Things are going well for 5 years, 1 year at a time. So I don't know, I'm just going to pluck a number out. Let's say your community fee would be $300. And so there'd be $300. And then let's say you identify a project, you want to do a dog park. Well, then part of the challenges for the coach is to help the community find a source for that, whether it's fundraising or a grant, or maybe the community foundation. There's a number of potential revenue streams, but there's no, the coach is the cost of the program, in the sense of that's what's going to be the building block to these other programs.
And kind of as a side note on that, is part of the value add from an ECICOG standpoint is, doing a facilitation, or potentially doing a 1 grant a year for each community that is interested. So in participating in the program, it could be any kind of grant. It doesn't have to be one for a dog park, but it could be any kind of housing, some grant, as kind of a value add, just because that's kind of partially where our expertise lie.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up on that. We normally already write grants for you that are CDBG type of grants, or the large state and federal grants, but we don't always write grants to nonprofits or foundations, things like the Wellmark match grant that we do typically charge our communities for. So as part of this program, we would write those types, one of those types of grants, free per year.
Are there any other questions for Kevin or myself? Or
I'll just say that I'd be glad to, if you have those in your community that have questions, I know this is taped, but I'd be glad to make a Zoom presentation to others in your community or make a person, in-person type of presentation too, if that would be helpful. So just let me know.
Kevin, would you say it's, as we're thinking about expectations, and would you say it's true that as you bring these groups of people together that, you're not necessarily going to solve a housing crisis or a housing crisis out of the box, but instead it's kind of about building capacity within that community and starting with small wins so that you're building
Exactly.
skill sets moving forward?
Exactly. And that's what I meant to suggest with the Fremont County. I mean, that they started with some small projects, got some wins, and then by the end of the 5 years, I mean, they felt comfortable enough that they were actually tackling bigger problems, like housing or their, broadband type of things. So, but there could be a different set of bigger issues, community vitality issues in your community. So, it can go a lot of different directions. But I just use that as an example. Exactly what you're saying is they started with some more smaller projects, but they build up to some of these larger, more impactful programs as well.
Are there any further questions? I always, I always kind of give that pregnant pause just to see if there's anything that percolates up in there. Okay. Well, so what I'll do is Michelle was curious about sending the slide deck out. I'll send the slide deck out. Kevin, if you don't mind sending that to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then I'll probably follow up with each of you just to kind of get your feelings on what you're thinking. Ultimately, I think we'd like to know if you're interested or not. And if you're interested, then I think we can start kind of figure out how to make something work. But so you're not committing to anything just by telling me you're interested in potentially participating. But we do want to know if you would be interested or not. So get ready to get a few emails from me. Anything else from Karen, Kevin? Anybody?
Oh, appreciate the chance to visit with you. And like I say, if you have questions, I'd be glad to follow up either with a call or a Zoom call or in person if that's more helpful.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your afternoon and stay warm.
Okay, take care.
Bye.